They say every school has its secrets. Locked rooms nobody's allowed to enter, hallways that feel wrong for no reason, stories passed down through generations of students until nobody remembers if they're true or just legend. At Riverside High, we had room 317. I'm Alex Brennan, and I'm 17. Junior year, straight B student, nothing special. I wasn't popular, wasn't an outcast, just existed in that comfortable middle zone where you can go through high school relatively unnoticed. That's how I liked it. Until I became the first person in 30 years to actually enter room 317. Let me back up. Riverside High was built in 1952. It's one of those old brick buildings with high ceilings and actual wood floors that creak when you walk. The kind of school that smells like floor polish and old books and has radiators that clank in the winter. The third floor was always the weird one, colder than the rest of the building, lights that flickered. You know the deal. Room 317 sat at the end of the east hallway. The door was always locked, had been since before any current students started attending. There was no window in the door like the other classrooms had, just solid wood painted industrial beige, no nameplate, nothing to indicate what it had been used for. We all knew the stories, of course. Every freshman heard them during orientation week, whispered in the cafeteria or passed along during gym class. A student died in there in the 70s. No, 80s. No, it was a teacher who had a heart attack, or maybe someone jumped out the window, or there was a fire, or a shooting. The details changed depending on who was telling the story, but the core remained the same. Something bad happened in room 317, and the school sealed it up and pretended it didn't exist. I'd walked past that door hundreds of times over the past 2.5 years. Never gave it much thought beyond a vague curiosity. It was just part of the landscape. Like the water fountain on the second floor that never worked, or the exit sign in C Wing that hung crooked. Everything changed on a Tuesday in October. I'd stayed late for a meeting with Mr. Chen about my history project. By the time I left his classroom, it was almost 6 p.m. The building was mostly empty, just a few teachers in their rooms grading papers and the janitorial staff starting their rounds. I was heading toward the stairs when I heard it. Music. Faint but distinct, coming from the third floor. I stopped, listening. It was old music, like really old, big band stuff my grandparents might listen to, and it was coming from the east hallway, from the direction of room 317. I should have left, should have gone straight home, but curiosity is a hell of a thing. I climbed the stairs to the third floor. The hallway was dimmer than usual. Half the fluorescent lights either off or flickering. The music got louder as I walked, definitely coming behind that door. I tried the handle, locked, like always. But then I noticed something I'd never seen before. A key, hanging on a small hook next to the door frame, partially hidden behind a fire extinguisher case. Old-fashioned, the kind with an ornate head and a long shaft. I don't know what possessed me to take it. Maybe I was tired of mysteries. Maybe I was just bored. But I reached out, grabbed the key, and slid it into the lock. It turned smoothly, like it had been oiled yesterday. The door swung open. The music stopped. The room had changed, gone back in time somehow, become what it had been 20 years earlier. And we changed too. Or rather, we got stuck. Between then and now, between what was and what is. I looked at the students sitting at the desks. They were still motionless, staring at nothing. Are they aware? Do they know what happened? In their way, she said, they're caught in a loop, waiting for class to start, waiting for me to begin the lesson. But I can't, because the lesson never ends. We just keep waiting, forever. How is this possible? I don't know, she said. Some kind of temporal anomaly, a glitch in reality. The school couldn't explain it, couldn't fix it, so they sealed the room, locked it away, pretended it never happened. Eventually, everyone who remembered moved on or died, and we were forgotten. But you're not forgotten, I said.
People still tell stories about room 317. Stories aren't the same as being remembered, she said. Stories are just echoes. We need someone to actually see us, to witness what happened, to know that we existed. I looked at the students again, really looked at them. They were just kids, my age, younger even, trapped here for over 40 years, waiting for a class that would never start. What can I do? How can I help you? Margaret Holloway smiled, a real smile this time. You already have, by opening the door, by coming inside, by listening to our story. You've made us real again, even if just for a moment. That's it? That's all you need? Not all, she said. There's one more thing. We need you to remember, really remember, not the stories and rumors, the truth, what actually happened to us. I will, I promise. She nodded. Then we can finally move on. The room began to change. The dust started to swirl, caught in a wind I couldn't feel. The figures in the desks started to fade, becoming more and more transparent. Margaret looked at me one last time. Thank you, Alex. I never told her my name. And then they were gone. All of them. The room was empty again, but different now. The desks were gone. The blackboard was gone. The record player was gone. It was just a bare room with concrete floors and empty walls. Modern, current, like it had been converted for storage and never used. I walked out, closed the door behind me, and tried the handle. Still locked. When I looked for the key, it was gone too. No hook, no key, nothing. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Margaret Holloway and her students trapped in that room for 40 years, waiting to be remembered. The next day at school, I went to the library, asked Mrs. Peterson, the librarian, if she knew anything about room 317. She got very quiet. Why do you ask? I'm curious. Everyone says something happened there, but nobody knows what. She looked around, making sure we were alone. Then she leaned in close. In 1973, an entire class disappeared, vanished during a fire drill. 23 students and 1 teacher. No bodies were ever found. No explanation. The room they were in was sealed up. The school district paid off the families quietly, made them sign NDAs. It was a scandal, but it was buried. What were their names? I asked. She pulled out a yearbook from 1973, flipped to the junior class section, and there they were, all 23 students, including a girl named Margaret Holloway, sitting in the front row with a bright smile. Wait, the teacher was named Margaret? I asked. No, Mrs. Peterson said, checking the faculty section. The teacher was James Sullivan. He disappeared too. There was no teacher named Margaret Holloway. But I had seen her, talked to her. She'd told me her name.
Room 317 was frozen in time. That's the only way I can describe it. While the rest of the school had been updated over the decades, this room looked exactly like it must have in 1952. Old wooden desks with attached chairs arranged in neat rows, a blackboard at the front still covered in chalk equations, a teacher's desk with papers stacked on it, a record player in the corner, the kind with the big horn speaker. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, but that wasn't the weirdest part. The weirdest part was that the clock on the wall was still ticking, keeping perfect time, 5:47 p.m. I stepped inside, my shoes leaving prints in the dust on the floor. The air was cold, not just chilly, but genuinely cold, like I'd walked into a freezer. Hello? My voice sounded too loud in the silence. Nobody answered. I walked further in, looking around. The papers on the teacher's desk were lesson plans, dated October 15, 1973, 42 years ago, almost to the day. On the blackboard, someone had written, "Class dismissed. See you tomorrow." But there had been no tomorrow, not for this room.
I picked up one of the lesson plans, careful not to tear the aged paper. It was for an English class, 11th grade. The teacher's name at the top, Margaret Holloway. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around, dropping the paper. A woman stood in the doorway, older, maybe in her 60s, wearing a cardigan and skirt that looked like they were from another era. But the strangest thing was I could see through her, just slightly, like looking through frosted glass. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "I heard music and I found the key and I just—" "You're the first one to open this door in 30 years, she said. Her voice had an odd quality to it, echoey, like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. The first one to use the key. I was beginning to think everyone had forgotten. Forgotten what? She stepped into the room, and I noticed she left no footprints in the dust on the floor. You were forgetting that I'm still here, that we're all still here. We? As if in response, the desks began to fill. One by one, translucent figures materialized in the seats. Teenagers, all of them wearing clothes from the 70s, bell-bottoms, platform shoes, long hair and sideburns. They stared straight ahead, perfectly still, like they were waiting for class to start. I backed up until I hit the blackboard. "What is this? What's happening?" "October 15, 1973, the woman said. She was clearer now, more solid. I could see her face properly. She looked tired, sad. I was teaching 11th grade English. We were reading The Great Gatsby. I remember because we'd just gotten to the part where Gatsby shows Daisy his shirts." She smiled faintly at the memory. "It was a normal day. Boring even, until the drill." "Drill?" "Fire drill. The alarm went off at 2:35 p.m. We all got up and filed out of the room, just like we'd practiced. Down the stairs, out to the parking lot. We stood there while the principal counted everyone, and then—" She trailed off. "Then what?" "Then he said we could go back inside. But when we got to the 3rd floor, the door to room 317 wouldn't open. It was locked from the inside. We could hear something in there, a roaring sound. The janitor got his keys, unlocked it, and when we opened the door—" She stopped, her form flickering like a bad TV signal. "It was empty," she whispered. "The room was completely empty. Our books, our bags, everything we'd left behind when we evacuated, gone, and in their place, this." She gestured around the room, at the old desks, the ancient blackboard, the record player. I looked back at the students section. Margaret Holloway, age 16. English was listed as her favorite subject. And then I understood. She hadn't been the teacher, she'd been a student, but in those 40 years of waiting, of being trapped, she'd taken on the role of the teacher, the caretaker, the one who stayed aware while the others slept, keeping watch, hoping someone would eventually remember. I checked out the yearbook and took it home. That night, I wrote down everything I remembered, every detail, the room, the students, Margaret, what she'd told me. I wrote down all 23 names from the yearbook, said each one out loud, made them real again, even if just in memory. When I finished, it was after midnight. I closed my notebook and got ready for bed. As I was turning off my light, I glanced out my window. Margaret Holloway was standing on my front lawn, solid now, real. She looked up at me and waved, just once, and then she turned and walked away, fading with each step until she disappeared completely. The next morning, I went back to school early, walked up to the 3rd floor. Room 317's door was different. It had a window now, like all the other classrooms. I looked inside. It was a normal classroom. Desks, whiteboard, posters on the walls. A teacher was setting up for first period. Nothing strange, nothing unusual. The room had finally moved on. But I kept the yearbook, and I kept my notebook with all the names, because Margaret was right. Stories aren't the same as being remembered, and those 24 people deserved to be more than just a locked door at the end of a hallway. They deserved to be remembered as they were, real people who lived and laughed and went to school just like me, who had futures stolen from them by something nobody could explain. I visit their graves sometimes. The school had them declared legally dead in 1980. They're all buried in Riverside Cemetery, small headstones with their names and the same date, October 15, 1973. And bring flowers, leave them at Margaret's grave usually. I tell her about school, about the dumb stuff that happens in the hallways, about the teachers and the drama. I like to think she can hear me, that wherever she is, she finally gets to rest. But sometimes, late at night when I'm walking past the 3rd floor, I swear I can hear it. Faint music, big band, playing from a room that doesn't exist anymore. And I smile, because I know they're not really gone, not completely. They're just on the other side of the door, finally free, finally home. My name is Alex Brennan. I'm 17 years old, and I was the last person to see room 317 before it disappeared forever. But more importantly, I was the first person in 30 years to remember the people who were trapped there. And I'll never forget them, not ever. Because that's what being remembered really means. Not being a story, not being a legend, but being a name that someone speaks out loud, a face that someone recalls, a life that someone acknowledges existed. Margaret Holloway, Sarah Chen, Robert Davidson, Jennifer Mills, Michael Torres, Lisa Yamamoto, Christopher Anderson, Amanda Green, David Kim, Rachel O'Brien, Joshua Martinez, Emily Thompson, Brandon Lewis, Ashley Patel, Tyler Scott, Nicole Rodriguez, Ryan Walsh, Megan Foster, Jordan Brooks, Samantha Hughes, Andrew Bell, Kayla Monroe, Justin Crawford. 23 students and 1 teacher who became a student who became a teacher. 24 people who deserved to be more than just a locked door at the end of a hallway. Now they are. And every October 15th, I read their names aloud, all of them, so they stay remembered, so they stay real. Because the worst thing that can happen to a person isn't dying, it's being forgotten. And I made a promise. I intend to keep it.